Some of you know who Terrance Howard is. Some of you don't. Those that don't, he's an actor. Most recently, he was on Empire. But what you may not know is that he's been basically self taught, teaching himself physics and science and math and all this type of stuff his entire life and loves it. And he's been going viral recently because of his episode on Joe Rogan, where he starts questioning a lot of everything, even from the fundamentals of our mathematics to physics. Now, some people are saying he's a genius, some people are saying he's an absolute moron. I'm not here to say any of that. I'm here to show you how you could take some of the things he talked about in the podcast and how they actually relate to you and your money. So first, I'm going to go through some clips so you can see some of the stuff about Terrance's background and how he went through this. And then I'm going to use those clips to point out the lessons that you need to take away from this in terms of managing your own money. Let's jump into it.
She destroyed my name. But like I said, I thought that was a death blow. But that's what took me back when I had nothing. That's what took me back to this. And that greater being started showing up again.
And you think if that had not happened, you probably would have gone further and further down
God.
the world of acting, and you would have abandoned this.
Oh, my goodness. I had, I was doing Iron Man.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, that gets taken away. We did a 3-picture deal with Marvel, a 3-picture deal, $4.5 million for the first one, $7.5 to $8 million for the second one, $12 million for the third. We signed it. They come back to me the week that my mother dies, and they called my agent, Charles King, he was at William Morris at the time, and they said, yeah, we want Terrance, but we want to come back for $1 million instead of the $8 million that we had agreed to. And my agent had an emotional reaction to a business decision, and he said, F you, and hung up the phone. Well, immediately they go to Don Cheeto.
Oh.
But instead of just doing that, they had to spin, he was terrible on set and all of these things, and went through all this stuff. And I'm calling Robert Downey Jr. I'm calling him because when I was doing the Brave one with Jodie Foster, Susan Downey was a producer with Joe Silver. She comes over to my trailer and she's like, wow, it's so amazing. Congratulations on Iron Man. It's the first time they've hired the second lead before they've hired the first. But Robert wants to go in there. And they were talking about Clive Davis and all of that. And I was like, okay, great. I'm just moving along doing my thing. And she was like, but Robert really wants to go in, but they won't see him. And I was like, I love Robert. I love what he does. I loved him in Weird Science. I loved him.
Who did they want?
They wanted Clive Davis to play him. Because remember, in the series, War Machine was supposed to take over.
Right.
And I'm like, well, if Robert wants to come in, so I called Avi Arad immediately. He was the producer on it. And I'm like, Avi, I hear Robert wants to come in, but you guys won't even let him audition. He's like, no, we can't bond him. I'm like, instead of the $4.5 you want to give me, why don't you take $1 million for the bond for him and let him audition, and so he gets the part. Robert is like, I love you, thank you so much, da 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 da. Well, when this other thing happened, I'm calling Robert and he's doing Sherlock Holmes. I called him 27 times. And I'm like, and leave a message. I'm calling his assistant. I'm like, I need the help I gave you. I didn't hear from him until 3 years later. I bumped into him at Brian Grazier's wedding. And then, but at that time I'd had Empire or whatever, and I came back. He was like, oh, but everything worked out for you. And, that broke me a little bit, but I know how hard Robert had it.
Coming out of jail.
Coming out of that jail. And so if I had to sacrifice myself in order for that, gladly trade whatever $100 million I would have made doing that for this right here.
So the big lesson from this Joe Rogan podcast, okay, is that Terrance says that had that stuff not happened, he probably would have never been in the spot that he is now in terms of doing what his passion is. And why is that so important? Okay, I'm going to give you a business example as well as a personal example. Okay. First off, for example, with FitBucks, okay, we have always had this vision of building the financial planning AI, being able to get products, being able to track your financial plan, doing everything in one location. That has always been the vision. But when we first started, I said, hey, I want to focus on young professionals. The biggest problem is student loans. Let's start the technology there. So we did that for the first 2 or 3 years that we were a company, was only focusing on student loans. Nothing wrong with that. Great business plan, do student loans, get people using it, then build out the rest. That was the game plan. But the reality of what happened is like what we say in business is I started, as a business started chasing this golden ball. When we released that technology and that service in 2019, our revenue skyrocketed. And the stuff that we were building was kind of like these small nuanced things like, hey, we have this big chunk of the student loan piece, but let's spend time building this little piece and this little piece and this little piece. And the financial planning technology was almost an afterthought at that point. And then COVID hit, and all the federal loans got put on forbearance, and it just tanked our revenue, right? And for months, I was like pissed because like we were doing good. And then I took a step back, kind of like what Terrance did, and I said, hey, this might be a blessing in disguise because instead of having to go to investors to pay for this, we got revenue and it's still sitting in the bank. I don't have to go outside. I can keep the engineers we have, but because student loans aren't there right now, let's go start focusing on building out the bigger picture, the financial planning, what we call the manual financial plan builder. We got that out. Now let's start building out the AI. We're getting that out. Let's build out the tracking technology. We're getting that out. Let's get to more partners with student loans and credit card refinances. So we have all that stuff now. Again, it was the distraction. It was that little shiny ball. And instead of going this way towards what we wanted our technology to do, we started going this way. Okay. Same thing with like what Terrance Howard is saying. He started going down this acting route and could have been an actor as the rest of his life, but his true passion, regardless of if you agree with him or not, that's his passion. And that's what he's going after. And this is key for each one of you on a personal standpoint as well. You see, because this is what I see with young professionals all the time. We help everybody now, but let's focus on healthcare. Like you go to become a nurse, a PA, a PT, an OT, whatever it is, because you want to help people, right? That's like the fundamental reason. If you didn't like helping people, you wouldn't want to do it, okay? Now, what ends up happening though, let's just say this PT now graduates, they got to graduate now. Instead of just focusing on that being a PT and loving it, they got student loans distracting them, right? They got cost of living because of inflation distracting them. They got home prices at an all-time high distracting them. They got marriage distracting them. They got kids distracting them. They got their car loan distracting them. Credit cards distracting them. Their friends telling them they should go into crypto distracting them. Their friends telling them they should buy XYZ distracting them. And all of a sudden, you lose what you were initially going out to do. And what ends up happening for that quote unquote PT is they say, well, I hate my job at that point, and they burn out and they go into something else. And then what ends up happening is I see this all the time. I hear back from people if they start a new job, I'm so excited for this. I'm getting out of this industry, blah, blah, blah. And then they come back to us 6 to 12 months later. I'm like, how's it going? Like, how's your plan going? They're like, everything sucks. Like, this new job is horrible. They don't realize that the noise is distracting them from what their true purpose was. And most people that aren't cognizant of that, they will just keep getting distracted their entire life. But if you're conscious of that and saying, look, this is my number one thing, you end up just blocking out all that extra noise. So, for example, when it comes to money, when we say things like your long term goal is one thing to increase money for future self, your short term goal is one thing at a time. You list all your goals and you do one thing at a time. When you do that and you filter out all the noise, you accomplish that one goal at a time and then go to the next one, the next one, the next one. And you're feeling accomplished. Whereas most people, it's like, well, I got this one goal, but I have this another goal, so I'm going to put some money there too. And then my child wants this, so I'm going to put some money there. And the next thing you know, they never hit that short term goal. They just say, screw this, and they give up, or they just don't even think about it. Next thing you know, they're 60 years old, they have no money. Okay. So then that leads to how do you not let something distract you? Now, like I've told you guys, many of you guys that listen to this podcast or watch our videos, I'm huge on data. I'm huge on formulas. I'm huge on all these things, right? So I want to break this down to a formula, and I've said this in other, episodes, and I'm going to reiterate it again. Okay, this formula is in identity equals belief equals thoughts equal action equals reality. what most people that are unconscious of this formula do is they just say, look, I do this action, therefore this happens. They don't think about those other three things: their identity, their belief, and their thoughts. Okay, so if I go back to this, like that PT that I just gave you an example to, they're like, well, I'm going to be a PT and go to PT school and graduate. And then they got all these distractions around them. And so their actions are focusing on those other distractions. So their reality now becomes chaos. They're not accomplishing anything. So then they say, well, I got to do something else. I'm going to take action. I'm going to switch jobs. And then it's still chaos. And that's their reality. They never changed the other three parts of that formula. So instead, you got to sit there and say, look, my identity is X. That now gives me this belief system. These are my thoughts. These are my actions. I'll give you an example again of myself being the founder of FitBucks. It's like we're just trying to help people like manage their money, not because of dollars and cents. I want like people being quadruple millionaires and all that stuff. That would be great. But the whole point is if we reduce the stress that people have around money, then that releases fear and stuff that they can go out and do what they're supposed to do, being a PT and whatnot. That's my identity. Like, so when people say, oh, you work X amount of time on FitBucks all day long, to me, it's not work. I just be doing this anyways. That's the identity. So then the belief comes in, and it's like, look, I have this belief that we will help people. If we continue to go down this path, great. This is what we do. And I start picking out things like Terrance Howard's podcast, where I see things and I hear things that back up that belief. And then I get thoughts about, oh, well, I could take this and generate a video off of this to help people do this. So therefore, I take action, make the video, and then that's what happens with reality. Now, that reality part, this is where the money piece and being successful with money comes in. Okay. The reality piece is what I call the score takes care of itself. Now, I took that from an old football coach named Bill Walsh. He used to be a football coach for the 49ers. After he went there, he went into business consulting, taught at Stanford, all this type of stuff. Okay. But that was his saying: the score takes care of itself. When he did it with football, I gave you that example of myself with FitBucks. This is my identity. This is the beliefs. This is the thoughts. These are the actions that I take. The reality is the score then takes care of itself. So if it's like YouTube videos, if we are truly helping people with these videos, which by the way, if we are, hit that like button, right? Then they will expand. The channel will grow. We'll get more views, so on and so forth. If we get more views, we'll get more people at FitBucks. If more people are understanding the stuff that we're talking about in terms of financial planning and everything else, we get more people at FitBucks. If we do more webinars, more workshops, more stuff with more universities, the score, i.e., revenue and profitability and everything else, will take care of itself. I don't need to focus on that part. And the point is that I'm happy doing it. And so that reality is FitBucks, for example, can never make it huge. I can make $50,000 a year off of it. It could be sold down the road for $1 billion. At the end of the day, I personally don't care because I'm happy doing this, because this is my identity. And that's what Terrance Howard is saying in this podcast with Joe Rogan. He has started down this path of acting, which he loves to do, but his true passion was what he's working on right now. And he can give up that $100 million for that lead role that he had and not be angry about it anymore, because he's doing what he loves to do, because that's his identity. It has then shaped his beliefs, it shapes his thoughts, and now he's taking action. The reality part will then take care of itself. Let it be that he's going to be the next genius that changes the world, or he's known as a fool in history. It doesn't matter to him, because that's his identity and he loves doing it. And the score will take care of itself. So I hope each one of you understand trying to find out what you want that identity to be, so that way it shapes your beliefs and your thoughts and your actions, so that way you don't burn out and whatnot. And then the next steps that you need to take are